Hello there. Hope you're all doing well. Today is the 1st of December 2020, and there's been a new update on the ESS, so I decided to make a video talking all about it and also the change in the meta. I've made a previous video before. My name's Sagan. It's your boy. I'm on the test server today, and we're gonna enter this acceleration gate. I'm in a Harbinger just for demonstration purposes. Right. So, what's changed? A lot has changed. I guess we're going to talk about briefly about what ESS is, about a brief introduction if you don't know about it already. Basically, it's a way to steal from ratters in soft nullsec. You have to go inside this bubble, very vulnerable. You're inside this massive bubble, sucks big time, and you have to stay here for a elongated period of time until you get war bonds. Right. So basically, you don't really want to be here. So let's look about what we talked about briefly in the last video. Just a quick catch up, very quickly. I don't want to waste you guys' time. Let's go. Okay, right. So I've vastly increased my paint skills, as you can see. You can actually read it now from far away. Last video I talked about the standard meta outside the bubbles, and using micro-warp drives. And basically, brawl with good warp ins beats sniper. Sniper usually beats people who try and kite away because they try to burn in one direction. And kitey likes the control range, so they like to beat brawls. Outside of the bubble, outside of the ESS meta, before ESS came, battleships beat battle cruisers, and battle cruisers beat cruisers. With these ESS changes, with only battleships, battle cruisers, and cruisers only being allowed to enter these plexes, you have a more interesting dynamic because with the brawl and the sniper, if the brawl doesn't like the fight, it could just warp away. But the problem is that if you look inside this, you will always land at that beacon at 0. So if there's a sniping battleship and you're a brawler and you warp inside that beacon, you're boned. You know, you have to burn out and it sucks. But there's been a couple of changes to the ESS recently, and I'm going to talk about it. So let's have a look at the patch notes, shall we? So I'm going to change to the patch notes. Here we go. Lovely jubbly. So there was a brief event. That was a Black Friday tax haven. It's now over. But these are major benefits, and the buffs and nerfs that have just released today. So what does this mean by equilibrium value and what it's increased by? So the previous update, if you rat more in a system or rat less, the value of the bounty ticks in soft nullsec when you go rat would change. And the middle area, if nothing happened, is this number, the equilibrium value. So it's now been increased, so if nothing happens in that system for a while, it will naturally go back up to an even higher percentage than it was before. That's a very, very good change. And the maximum output of this dynamic bounty system, that they like to call it, has been increased by 30%. So if there's a lot of destruction, there's a lot of chaos going on these sites, if no one's ratting in these sites, you'll get nearly double than what you used to before. That's huge. To recover to equilibrium rate at states that have been below the equilibrium value has been increased, make it easier for the systems to recover. So we've noticed that if a system gets too low, as low as 30%, it's very difficult to get the rate back up and try and heal that system to better bounty ticks. So yeah, just keep that in mind. But here's the counter surveillance system. They've adjusted some of the parameters, and this is really interesting. The time required to hack the main back increased from 5 minutes to 6 minutes and 30 seconds. This is a nerf to attackers and a buff to defenders. Defenders have more time to form up and fleet up and find some form of response. Alongside as well, attackers will be able to make less ESS attempts per hour. The auto payment timer reduced from 3 to 2 hours. That's huge as well. So that means someone who's has only 2 hours instead of 3, they'll be able to rat and, you know, rat every other hour and find a thing that works for them. That's a massive buff to people who are defending, aka the people who are investing money into the ESS that they're trying not to get stolen. And this is the most interesting one. The radius from the ESS where cloaking is restricted has increased from 75 kilometers to 150 kilometers. All other effects remain at 75-kilometer radius. What does this mean? So it's not on the live. It's very difficult to see on the live server. But if I go back to Eve and I show here, so basically all of the restrictions, we can't micro warp drive, we can't micro jump drive, can't do any of the fancy tricks like that. You can't cyno, you can't use filaments. That is still visible in the 75-kilometer radius bubble. However, alongside that, 150 kilometers away from this beacon, there will be still warp disruptions that will not make you able to have a cloaked ship. Why is this a big deal? Well, actually, let's have a look back at my lovely paint document. And you can see here that snipers are significantly nerfed by this update, because it's very easy to set up traps when the requirement is just burn out of a bubble, 75 kilometers, cloak up. You're not shown on D-scan, you're not shown up on combat probes. So the only notice that you are in a trap is that you're in local. You can't log off and then back in again, because you'll end up at the gate. So you'll always have to stay logged in. And what that does is that basically sniper traps, where essentially you are very far away and you cloak up, that's been nerfed a little bit. It's not impossible to have something that works for you and have a fit. There are still plenty of fits that can easily fit to 150 kilometers plus. There's some fits that go out to 300 kilometers. So it's not that snipers are dead, but there's more counterplay and there's more sacrifices you need to make the sniper builds work in form of cloaky traps. You can still have snipers without a cloak, but the thing is that people will be able to find you on D-scan, and it's not really a trap. It's more the defending side or the attacking side or whoever's going up against you will be knowledgeable of your position using D-scan, using like 1AU D-scan and finding, okay, right, there's, for example, in this case, for example of sniper, a Naga. So you've got a Naga. They'll find the Naga on D-scan and they'll say, okay, we're going up against a Naga, we'll be able to plan for that. You could do that, it's totally fine. You don't need to use the cloak, but it is a nerf for a specific type of playstyle. But it's still usable. So we're going to talk about how that's changed, and then we're going to talk about some recent fights and how the meta has changed. Some of my predictions have been correct. Some of my predictions have been awful. We'll talk about that. But I'm just going to go back to Eve. So let's have a look-see back to Eve. Lovely. So this is a Harbinger. Say hello to Mr. Harbinger. And you can see that this Harbinger, if I put on all the mods, can only hit to about 100 kilometers. Right? Right. Okay. So that's not great, because that means I can't cloak, because the no cloaking radius bubble is within 150 kilometers. Right? Right. However, there is a thing called a micro jump drive, And I've got one installed to my ship right here. You can fit them on battleships and battle cruisers. So as the Harbinger is a battle cruiser, I'm able to fit this medium micro jump drive. Right. So I can cloak up. I can absolutely cloak up. I'm outside of this 150 kilometers. As you can see, I'm 183. And say I have a juicy particular prey that warps straight in to that beacon over there. Then what I could do is I can uncloak, approach that beacon, press my micro jump drive. There's an activation delay on this prototype cloaking device anyway. That's absolutely fine. And once this micro jump drive is active, I'm able to jump 100 kilometers. I'm still outside the bubble. I'm still out. This is the most important thing. I'm a sniper. Whoever lands at that beacon has to burn towards me, you know, at least 75 kilometers to get towards me, and I can lock them up. I can absolutely lock them up, and I can shoot them 100 kilometers away. So this change in the no cloaking nerf, it asks you to make tougher decisions, and that's a good thing. That's a really, really good thing. So this Harbinger fit used to not actually have, before I made this, didn't actually have a fitting mod, and it didn't have this micro jump drive mod. So it's still weaker. It does less damage. It does less tracking. It does less applicable damage to the people it traps. That's a really, really important thing. So that means it's a lot easier to counter. Will it be enough? Will the meta change as a result? I don't know. But you get a good example of how you'll see less sniper traps, and if you do see sniper traps, they'll be a lot easier to run away from. I'll talk about that later with example fits. But let's go back to let's go back to this, and I'll talk about some recent fights that have been really interesting when I've been looking at their kill boards and looking at streams. So we've got, if you're talking about defense, if you're talking about people defending their space, you have to talk about Fraternity and their almost vehement defense of Oasa, which is their major ratting pocket. Most people who use filaments to go into Oasa, they hate Oasa because the amount of people that go into defending that space alone. They rat hard, they play hard, they PvP hard. This is an ESS fight where you see the fit I talked about yesterday, which was the thoraxes. That was shield and a web and a 10 men, and it's brawly. So basically what they want to do is they want to stay at the beacon at 0. They want to stay at the beacon at 0. They want to web anything that lands on the beacon at 0 and basically destroy it before it can kill them. Right? Right. So this is not a new fit or anything like that. This has been known for a while, right? But what's been interesting is the response. The response has been mostly praxises. So I talked about praxises in the last video. They're very, very deadly ships. They're cheap to buy, but you won't get the insurance back. And like I said before, the prediction I did get right is that they're rapid heavy missile launcher fit. Praxises are an excellent anti-cruiser platform with these rapid heavy missile launchers. This one's armor fit. And the reason why this is interesting, I really want to put this battle report up, is because this particular fleet response decided to bring Barghest, and Nesters to a fight against these thoraxes. And that's interesting because when you think about it, these thoraxes do a lot of DPS, like a lot of DPS when you've got 10 of them or so. So say it, heated, when you overheat your guns, this has around about like 800 DPS. Well, if you've got 10 of them, then that makes 8,000 DPS. Battleships usually hover between 100,000 effective hit points and 150, but most are kind of around about 100,000, right? Say, for example, 100,000. So this Thorax gang alone can take down a battleship in around about 10 to 15 seconds, which is really, really scary. And that's why you've got these nesters, because if you want to bring Logi, the best Logi there is for a subcap is a Nestor, and Nestors bring armor. You know, they have bonuses towards armor, so you bring armor ships. So this Praxis is armor. These Balgons are armor. This Nightmare, not sure what's here. This Dominix, this Typhoon, probably armor. This Rattlesnake, probably shield. We'll see. But you can see that the Nestor is a huge part of keeping the Praxises alive. But even when that Nestor is there, it can still lose ships. It's, you know, brawling at 0 is a very, very scary comp. And I was thinking, oh yeah, that's fine. You can kind of get away with countering these Thorax. In the last video I described, you can kind of get away with countering these Thoraxes with a rapid heavy missile launcher Praxis. So I got that right. Hooray, go me! I didn't anticipate Nestors. I saw a stream of Fraternity using Nestors in ship, and it was really scary. They just couldn't break anything in time. It was very, very scary. But that's something I want to do, is that, like, if you want to survive as long as possible, bring battleships, bring Nestors. I'll talk about shield later, but we'll leave it there. I thought this was going to be the standard meta, but there was a fit that was so insane that I could anticipate, that I will talk to you about in a bit. But basically, there were some things I got wrong. Another thing I got wrong is that there have been no fast response ships going. So there's no T3 cruisers or bombers or Black Ops ships warping in using a covert Sino onto an ESS and then taking the gate and then taking out whatever's in it. Turns out that basically the meta is refined enough that there isn't really any T3 fits with a covert reconfiguration subsystem that's able to quickly respond and survive and also win the ISK war. T3s are good, but when you're talking about a brawling meta, there isn't like a T3 brawler that essentially wins out ISK-wise when compared against 8,000 DPS. Maybe in another meta, maybe if you had better scouting, you can get away with it, but in this meta, you can't. So that's interesting. Another interesting thing I forgot to mention about in the previous video is that this is a Caracal fit, but as you can see, this Caracal, while it has an afterburner, it's not buffer tanked. It's got an ancillary shield booster, and I was a massive idiot for not just discussing this, but your fit depends. Your fit will work better or less depending on how big the fight is. If you're fighting one-on-one, you want to bring shield boosters or armor repairers, and preferably ancillary ones, because they're better in PvP. So if you're in a gang of like 2 or 3 with no logic whatsoever, then yeah, bring a shield booster, bring an armor repairer, you know, replace some mods, because then you can last in the fight a bit longer. I was a massive idiot for not mentioning that, so I do apologise. So your fit depends not only on like what the enemy is bringing, but also what you have. Obviously, if there are 10 thoraxes, you're going to be buffer fit because you're going to try and live as long as possible. But otherwise, yeah, if you're in small gang or you wish to fight solo, active tank, please do. So yeah. And this, okay, so this is the bit where I got it wrong. So there was a fit that was so insane, and I saw this on a live stream, and it was so insane that I genuinely had to rethink this whole metagame. Like, if you believe in meta breakers, this is a meta breaker. This was in like a system that, and like this, so I'm brave. This is a brave fight where we lost the ISK war and we lost everything. It was an extra extra stream, extra squishy. I've apologies, can't remember your name. 1,000 apologies. But basically, these Brutixes, right, won the ISK war and the fight almost 3-1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 20, 21, 22. Yeah, so nearly 3-1. not only did they win the ISK war, because this is a 4 bill fit, so they like we've lost around about 2 billion ISK, and they lost 1.1 billion ISK, but they actually left the field afterwards. This is insane. So how did this happen? Well, let's look at the fit first, and this is something I didn't anticipate, and I will talk about. This is a Brutix, right? That's got a bonus towards armor repair, and yet it's got reinforced bulkheads. You can imagine my surprise when something this effective, like, actually won the fight 2-1. And then I thought about it, and then I realized what was going on. What's going on is that these Brutixes have enough health points to mimic a battleship, right? And they're they've got the DPS of a battleship. They haven't got the range of a battleship, but they're a third of the cost. And another thing was happening. So basically, they're really, really tanky. They've got 100,000 K. They've got 100k EHP, 100,000 EHP, and they do around about 800 DPS damage heated. Right, that's it. You know, you could mistake that for a battleship easily any day of the week, right? But what was going on in this fight was that these Brutixes were killing the cruisers who had no EHP at all. So they were killing anything that was landed on the beacon at 0 and was extra squishy. So they primaried the Blackbird. They primaried the Logi. They and they primaried the Stabbers, which were short range, I believe. By the way, yeah, they were short range, and yeah. So these fits, right? They were doing 800 DPS. They were smashing them, and basically they were smashing them so hard. You know, again, you know, this is, you know, if you bring like 10 of them, then it has nearly 10,000 DPS. That means it can kill a battleship in 10 seconds. It can kill anything that lands too close to it. You know, say this has 30k HP, that can kill it in 3 seconds, right? And it takes... So even though this probably has a roughly about... Say this, you know, these stabbers probably are like these stabbers of these Caracals alone will be able to match the DPS of the Brutises, because they're all focused on that one Brutix, and because that was so tanky, and because they're all at 0, they were just like, hey, we're just going to pick off these light targets all at once. So say this stabber is 5% of the fleet's DPS, right? And say all these Brutises are alive. These Brutises immediately murder that stabber, right? So it's 100% DPS against 95% DPS. And these Brutixes kill another stabber. Okay, 90% DPS versus 100% DPS. Then it's a third stabber, 85% to 100%. Meanwhile, this guy hasn't even broken to structure yet. So it was just, you know, probably like, I don't know, 90% structure. And then basically they were killing these cruisers so fast while their DPS was floundering, all the while they couldn't break the tank of one single Brutix. And it was insane because they all had webs, and there was, you know, quite a bit of Logi on field, but the Logi wasn't holding up in time, and it was crazy. Just like the amount of, like, basically by the end of the first 40 seconds of the fight, half the DPS on the Brave side had disappeared. And another thing as well, that's partially why it's so insane, but also because they have counters to web notification, kiting ships. So okay, so let me explain. So if they had anything that warps to 0 that would immediately run away, for example the Caracals, they have a stasis webify to grip them down, right? If they have energy neutralizers coming in towards them, so that means they can't fire their guns, they have a medium capacitor booster to boost them up. And if they get jammed, which in case was the Blackbird was, they've got a jam for that. They've got a counter to that, which is an ECCM script. So basically, you can't out-logi them because they've got 10,000 DPS and kill your cruisers in 3, 4, 5 seconds. They can't be jammed that well because they've got a counter to that. They can't be neutered out that well because they've got a cap charger. So that means even if you completely cap one out, you can't rely on it being out capped forever. It's got the battleship. It's got battleship EHP, battleship damage, and basically they're right exactly where you want them to. It's insane. This completely changes the meta in my experience. That basically you can't have if your defense and you go up against Brutix or anything like this, where essentially it's a hyper optimized brawling fit like this. You can't have an all-rounder fit. You had to have two fits. One that counters this Brutix and another one to counters, for example, snipers and kiters and stuff like that, and thoraxes and stuff like that. This is so powerful that basically it's a praxis in battlecruiser form, but just hits at 0. It's crazy. I'll talk to you about the numbers later, but just an example of just like, this is crazy. And I'll talk about actually something about how to rate how good these brawlers are. Another thing to note as well is that if you use hybrid guns, when I've been messing around on Pyfa, you get around about a 30 to 50% damage increase compared to other weapon systems, which is crazy. So basically, you like if you're in a brawling ship, you just, no matter what ship you're in, even if you've got bonuses towards other weapon systems, consider using like hybrid guns. You really should. So this isn't a simple case of battle cruisers beating cruisers. This is a case of every single ship being bait fit, but also lays enough heavy DPS that basically they're all bait battleships in battle cruiser form. One downside of this is that you can't hold that many cap charges because of the downside of the reinforced bulkheads. And another downside is that you cannot receive remote reps as well because bulkheads and structure tanking is what it's called, can't really receive reps as well as armor or shield. There's another downside I'm thinking of, but I can't think of it right now. So yeah, insane. The only way I would improve this fit is that basically the energy neutralizers was completely defunct. Basically, the whole fight was over. So to counter neuting even more, I'd probably replace this energy neutralizer for, say, maybe, I don't know, an Nosferatu, so that means you can get extra cap. But again, that energy neutralizer is absolutely fine. And before that, it impressed me even more because they killed, with this fit that wasn't even designed to kill anything else with afterburners, they decided to kill a Nagathar. I'm really impressed by this fit. Major points to Extra Squishy. You broke the meta. Congratulations. You're well done. Yeah. So, yeah, basically, I can't recommend a fit anymore that is kind of like, this is universal. You'll always find it in all these cases because this fit is so good. And because basically when you're attacking and defending, the attackers have a lot more options, and the defenders, they don't really know what they're going into. They'll have different ship types. So this stabber looks really cool for the attacking side, but the defending side, it might actually not be the best fit. And that's quite interesting. That essentially the defending side will probably want to, because of this Brutix meta and because of traps, they probably maybe want to be focused more along the sides of being more tanky. And the attackers, maybe they want to be focused more along the lines of being more kitey and like avoiding damage if they're on a smaller scale. For example, if they're robbing alone, then they probably want to have a kiting fit. And this is a nice segue of kiting. So let me go towards the paint screen. So let's have a look-see here. Lovely. So as you can see, kitey beats brawly. So you can see that there's an authoress here. I believe there's an authoress. I really know it is an authoress. I keep on forgetting this ship's name. And then say it's a Brutix, it'll be able to kill the Brutix quite easily. And Yeah, so there hasn't really been many updates in terms of kiting fits. However, there was a really cool YouTube video made by someone, and I'm going to not link it because I'll get copyright striked. But I will go to Pyfa, and basically all credit goes to Caldori Jones. You can find, if you type in into YouTube ESS Vedmak solo PvP. It's got this amazing, really cool compilation of someone who intentionally picks a Vedmak because people think they can take on a Vedmak and then completely destroys everyone. It's a really cool vid. I love it. It's really cool. I'm not a kiting person. I'm not a solo PvPer. I'm rubbish at solo PvPing. But check that video out. It's really cool. But that's really the only kind of like update in terms of the kiting meta. Any kiting ship that worked before still works now. There's the usual suspects, the Cinnaball, the Orthrus, the Phantasm. They still work, and now the Vedmak joins the ranks as well. So if you see a solo Vedmak, beware. Yes, so let's have a look-see as well. So let's talk about brawling fits. So I've got the Brawl Brutix. So this is the fit that I was talking about earlier. This is the what I consider the meta breaker along the lines, right? So this does 800 damage, heated, right? It's not going to do it 100. It's not going to do it all the time, but just to get a point that essentially the first couple seconds is so crucial because essentially you're trying to get as much DPS off the field as possible. You're trying to get the squishiest targets off the field if you're attacking or defending. You're just trying to kill whatever you can as quickly as you can, win the ISK war, and if you're lucky, win the fight because you're essentially gaining so much momentum and gaining critical mass, right? And this has got Battleship EHP, so it's got 100k EHP. And I did some maths on this, and basically, if you... I'm not going to spare you all the maths, but if you want to find out who will win in a fight between two ships, one-on-one, brawling at their optimals, all you got to do is multiply the effective HP with the DPS, and then that combined score together will give a tank and DPS score combined. I don't know what to call it. I'm not going to say... I call it brawling score. Okay, we'll call it brawling score. So this has got a brawling score of 800 times 100,000. So that's, by my maths, a lot. It's got a brawling score of 80,000, I think it is. Let's have a look, see. 100,000, yeah, so it's something like this, yeah. Anyway. Yes, 80,000. 8. You know what I mean. So it's, yeah. I'm just actually going to write this down now because it's really annoying me actually. 800. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so it's 80,000k brawling score. Let's say a score of 80,000. It's really good, right? And basically what you could do is you could figure out actually who would win in a fight between this Brutix and say for example, my Praxis. Because the fight's going on a while, I actually went and used the reloading DPS, so I factored in the reload because killing that will take a while. And also with a Praxis, with rapid heavy missile launchers, you can basically launch around about 50,000 DPS before you need to reload. So it is important to add in that 50,000. The drones are used hammerheads to make it, you know, be able to hit it. And it's 800 times 100,000. So basically, it's a very similar score, right? It's a very similar score, but it costs twice as much. And this is why it's a mess breakup. Is because you will lose more if it's a large enough number. If these Brutices gain critical mass of around about like 8 to 10 people, these Praxises, if you bring in equal number of Praxises, the Praxises will lose the ISK war. You won't be able to kill enough Brutices before those Brutices kill you, unless you bring in Logi. And basically, because the Brutix, because they're always at 0, they will shoot the Logi first. So there's quite of a conundrum that you can think about. So how do you counter that? With essentially they want to kill the E-War first, they want to kill the Logi first. Well, there's a if you're fighting against a Brutix, and basically they're trying to pop the squishiest things first. Basically, what you want to do is want to bring in ships that have a maximum amount of this score, where essentially you times the DPS by the effective health points, right? And also remember the Brutix has hybrid guns, so basically, even though these fights are like really quick and they happen really quickly, to the point when Newts and E-War, it doesn't really matter because they've got counters. What their main weakness is that the hybrid ammo that they uses thermal and kinetic. So what can we do with this information that we have thermal kinetic? Well, let's go back to Chrome and let's look at natural resistances. So basically there are when you look at ships, you will normally find that, Tech 1 ships have kind of the same resistances profiles. But if you go with faction or T2 ships, their resistance profiles change. And the ones that are the best resisted towards kinetic and thermal damage are T2 and T3, Galente, and Caldari. Let's have a look, see. Let's go on. Caldari. So if you're a shield comp and you want to counter against these hybrid ammo, then you bring for Logi Basilisks because they have natural high resist to hybrid ammo. You can bring in Eagles. I wouldn't recommend bringing in Cerberuses because remember they land at 0, so you want as much tankiness as possible. So you probably want heavy assault cruisers to buy your side a bit more time. If you've got lots of EHP, probably the best choice is the Vulture. The Vulture, if I go back to the Pyfa video and I show you this, obviously no one's ever going to do this, but if you're in an FC ship, you can do battleship DPS. You've got like a maximum battleship EHP, but look at those resists. Oh my goodness. And then so if I change the damage type to hybrid and I change it to void, that's 4 battleships in one, and you're paying like 1.5 battleships to cost. So if you have a really big problem, if you have Brutises, bring a Vulture. That's because it won't die. And basically you have to bring as many tanky ships as possible. So this is the meta that is now transformed into, where basically you want to bring the highest DPS combined with the highest DHP, and you want to stay on the field as long as possible. E-War doesn't matter, Logi doesn't matter, and Newts don't matter, but the longer you survive, the more that they'll be able to influence the thing of the battle. But basically with the brawling meta, the best E-War is just killing them. So they kind of matter, but essentially you could just do a lot better in other ships. And especially with the Brutix, with all these counters to all the things it would naturally counter, basically you can't really rely on those counters working, So yeah, let's have a look at some other examples of these ships working. So I've got a Mauler here. It's got 100,000 K. It's got like 100k HP. It's got very low damage, but it's very cheap. If you bring this Mauler along with the shield fleet, and you're going in the shield fleet, and you say, "Okay, I'm a Mauler," right? And they say, they look at that and just be like, "Okay, they brought in Logi, they brought in shield stuff, and this one's armor. Go and shoot the armor guy." They're going to shoot at you first. And that's a good thing because you've got 100k HP, and you're buying the rest of your fleet time to take them down. So this brawling meta is basically got basically 2 people hitting each other with sticks now. That's the new meta, where essentially you're trying to survive as long as possible and deal damage as much as possible, and trying to out-survive the other team. Logi doesn't matter as much, and E-War doesn't matter as much, but it's a matter of time. You could do the same with the Mower. Look at the Mower. It does more DPS because it has the slots for it. It does more. It has slightly less EHP. So basically, it's kind of more of a race. Essentially, we're trying to kill them as quickly as possible. Right. But if you want if you want to trick the enemy, if you want to trick the enemy into thinking, actually this person on my D scan, and you're an attacker, so you're basically going up against defenders. The defenders are looking inside the ESS using D scan, and say, okay, right, I want to fight against something I think that is snipey, so I'm going to bring some sniper builds. And then turns out they're not snipey, they're brawly. Turns out actually the Ferox is actually a really good brawling ship. So basically it has a really good combined score of EHP and damage, where basically it can pump out a lot of damage, but at the same time survive as long as possible as well. It's not as good as the Brutix. It's more easily to be countered. But if you want to try and bait the enemy into warping in a bunch of sniping battleships to counter your Feroxes, which are usually known for long range, you can bring in the Ferox. So that's another skill as an attacker you could do. And because the Ferox can also, it's a really good brawler. You know, it's not the best brawler, but it's good enough that it'll win most brawling fights. But alongside this, the brawling Ferox could also counter. You could also be refit into a sniper battleship. Probably the Ferox is probably the best ship to use just for defense, because you can bring blasters, you can bring some railguns, and then no matter what, you can just turn up and be able to fight. It's really, really handy. And also as well is that if you're basically always tanked anyway, because you've got a maximum amount of EHP. You're trying to get as much EHP as possible. So even if it is a trap, you're the one that's most likely to survive. So yeah. But say you want to make it as cheap as possible. Say that you wanted to make, this brawling score, and you want to be like, what's the best brawling score I can have with my ISK, and at the same time come out of a fight as positive as possible. I want to have a brawling setup, but I want it as cheap as possible, so I was always win the ISK war. You bring in the Gnosis. The Gnosis isn't a very good sniper. It's good at neuting and it's good at drones, but basically you get nearly the Gnosis's stats. The Gnosis' stats were basically you're doing 800 DPS, nearly 100k EHP, but half the cost. So these are a lot of options. And also, the one thing I didn't talk about the Gnosis and the Praxis and the ships like it in a previous video is that you don't know how they fit. This Gnosis could be fit. If you see this Gnosis as a defender with newts, on D-scan, you don't know how it's fit. It could be heavy missile fit. It could be, in this case, hybrid gun fit, which is really, really nasty. Or it could be fit with newts, energy neutralizers, and then basically nuke you out in about 30 seconds to a minute. You don't know how, and fighting that is really difficult as well. So this, I'd probably say like the winners of this meta is probably the Gnosis for unpredictability and the Ferox for just being really good in terms of like refitting ships. There is no like all-rounder ship anymore that we were able to fit any be able to win any fight, any ISK war. The Praxis has been dethroned by this Brutix, has completely wrecked the meta. That was a long rant, but I'm going to talk back to paint now, right? So I've updated this, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, with the ESS changes, which is on the right hand side, please look at the previous video. But the general ways that this video is trying to describe is that basically you're looking at each element. So we talked about kitey. Kitey hasn't really changed much. So we've got brawly. Brawly has changed quite a bit by this Brutix edition that has like dominated, I wouldn't say dominated the field, but essentially has surpassed all expectations. If you bring 10 Brutixes, they're really hard to counter. And then you've also got Sniper. Sniper has been nerfed a little bit because of this cloaking change, but you can still bring cloaking ships and still dominate the meta. So it's not like you're not allowed to use cloaking at all. It's just the traps will have a lot more caveats to them if you want to bring that up. So either you basically sacrifice the power credits of CPU and a mid slot for a micro jump drive, or you bring more expensive ships. So let's go back to Pyfa. Lovely. And let's go to these trap sniper build-ups. So there's been one that's going on quite a lot called the Barghest. So there's been a recent buff to torpedoes. They've increased in cost exponentially because of it, because they're really, really good ratting ships now. and yeah, I'm not sure how good, but very, very good. So this Barghest is intended to cloak at the 150-kilometer cloak distance now. So as the second it gets out that 150 outside of the bubble radius, it cloaks. And then once you're able to, once it's able to find some prey and the prey walks into the bubble, that Barghest is out of the bubble, it can decloak. It could either micro jump drive in if it was a chase, or it could just sit there, and it can go against the Inferno Heaven missiles and just launch all of it. And it's just wonderful. It's absolutely great. So let's go with a Thorax. Let's go with the standard brawler. So say some brawlers warp in. They want to brawl. And let's say we go against a Barghest. We took the graph. So it will do... Let's not factor in reload time. So it does 1,000 DPS. It does 1,000 DPS from 190 kilometers away. 180 kilometers away, sorry. And against a Thorax, it does 435. Right, so it does half DPS. But if you look at other options, for example, let's look at... Okay, I broke it. It's fine. This always happens. Oh, no, it's okay. But basically, the Barghest is the best one. I also wanted to show you that you're able to do it with, quite effectively as well with a Tengu as well that could equally hit up to the required amount without the need of a micro jump drive. It can't fit it anyway. And it can do about half damage, and it's around about 300 million ISK. Okay. Let's have a look-see here. Let's see if I can fix it. No, I can't fix it. That's a shame. So Pyfa is broken. So those are sad days. I went through all the fits, and as you can see, you can see there's all like the meta is formed, and all ships are being used. There's armor ships, so you can see if I go back to Chrome and I look at defense fleets, and you can see that like armor ships are being used because of the Nestor's ability to like rep battleships or like en masse to counter like high DPS setups. You can see shield is being used, like because that's kind of like where essentially you could do as much damage as possible and you get a really high brawling score, as well as you could kite and travel faster, and also just other stuff as well. And you're also seeing structure setups as well. You're seeing a lot of people with structures, like with advanced bulkheads. And there's a really diverse meta where essentially you're seeing the rock, paper, scissors of the different comps going up against each other and saying like, okay, right, I'm going to counter this setup with this setup. I'm going to out survive you. I'm going to out DPS you. I'm going to run away for a bit. So, it's like I think. Okay, so personal feedback to CCP. Okay, hello CCP. I hope you're listening. But thank you for listening so long. These are really good changes. I was listening to a Talking to the Station episode, and they said they wanted the attackers wanted a bit more money in the ESS, and it seems like you provided that with the changes. And also it seems that defenders said it was really difficult to, once you're inside the bubble, to counter what people's advanced ranges was, giving people more time, and it helps with that. And yeah, I'm really happy with how like you buffed both like essentially like the ratting income, so that means it's more worth it to brawl it as well, but also like you gave it, it's a bit hard to defend and a bit easier for the defenders to form up. Yeah, I'm really happy. Yeah, it's interesting. When you're talking about like I'm not like a game designer, like I've done like creative maps and stuff, but like when I look at games, I look at like play and counterplay, and most of the stuff I see here has counterplay, because if so, say you're defending right? So say you're defending and you have no idea what you're going up against, right? So say you're going up against these like really nasty Brutices that are shield tank, the basically like mini battleships, right? Then basically what you do is like when you land at that beacon, you don't want to stay at zero. You basically warp off in all directions and you're trying to make as much range as possible, right? So the people who have range, they burn out immediately. All the while, the people who are brick tanked, they want to stay in the fight and they want to get to as close as possible and then basically hit each other with sticks until one dies, right? So, and then you've got the kitey ships. You just, say so you're going up against kitey ships, and you know you can look to my last video and see counter stats to say you've got Orthrus or Phantasm, or something like that. You can get Caracals and Vexors and rapid heavy missile launcher praxises, and they're all great counters. But also, say you're like a defender and you go up against a sniper. The sniper isn't going to do as much damage as it did before. So there used to be like Ishtars that used to cloak at 75 kilometers outside the bubble and launch their their drones and then start attacking. I think there was a Bombers Bar video that did that, and that was very impressive. And yeah, basically the people inside the bubble are screwed. But now either they have to sacrifice their fit to add a micro warp drive, or they have to they have to fire from very, very, very far away. All the while, the people are burning out the bubble. And you can bring something like, and the meta, because it's shifting towards probably more EHP and tankiness, in case you don't know what you're fighting, they're more likely to survive once you get out the bubble. So, yeah, I think the meta is going to a more healthy place. And then you've got the trolls setups. One important thing to note is that some traps have like a stabber, like they have a stabber, and then essentially the stabber runs away, and then the sniper decloaks. The counterplay towards that is that you look at local, and you see that there's two neutrals in local, and you can only account for one. Local's been balked for the past couple of days, but that's the general idea. So yeah, I'm really excited for these upcoming changes. They're live now. I think it's more balanced than it was before. It's more fair towards the defenders, but also the attackers have more incentive. I'm really happy. Good job. Keep on. I don't think it needs much. It still needs iterating, but I think it was very close to the money at the beginning. And I praise CCP for iterating towards it. Good job. Really good job. I'm very, very happy. And also keep on changing the rules more. I love it when I do more theory crafting and Pyfa setups. So thank you for listening to my massive rant. I'm going to check through my notes. I think I've covered everything. Look, if you have no idea what I'm talking about and you want to know about how to counter kitey stuff, and you want to know more about like this particular graph and like what it means, look at my previous video. It's an hour long. And yeah, also one tip for defenders, right? Just burn away from the bubble. Just burn the beacon. If you're a defender, the worst place you want to be is on that beacon. Like you want to burn out immediately. The first thing you want to do is burn out immediately from that bubble. But yeah. Oh, also, yeah, another thing one thing I quickly said is, well, there's two things I want to say. I looked inside my notes, right? So why is a structured Brutix better than an armor Brutix? It's because of stacking penalties. So basically, when you add a reinforced bulkhead, it's a plus 25% EHP bonus. But with armor, you get like different flat bonuses, and what modules that increases resistances are subject to stacking penalties. So sometimes it's actually better to have the small cumulative bonus like structure add up lots of times, and sometimes that gets you a bigger number compared to playing with the bonuses of the ship. So battleships and battle cruisers benefit more from structure modules because it boosts theirs multiplicatively up to bigger numbers. But if you put a battleship class defense mod, so for example a 1600mm plate on a cruiser, that's going to be a bigger bonus overall because it's a huge bonus towards it. For example, the Mauler I showed you earlier, that had 2 battleship sized plates on it. You don't need to have 2 battleship sized plates on it. You can, if you have problems with fitting, you can replace it with one battleship with one which was a 1600mm and an 800mm. Boom, done. Good. So yes, and also if you're in doubt about, like, if you're a defender and you don't know what you're up against, bring lots of EHP. You can figure out what you want to do. If if it worst comes to worst, then you can easily burn out the bubble. Like the kitey can't really stop you because they're probably got to be not within weapon fire range unless I bring a specific ship that has bonuses towards weapon fires, and you could just burn out the bubble and survive the fight as opposed to trying to rely on DPS and that DPS landing. So like I said before, the defenders probably want to have more DPS, and sorry, not DPS. They want to have more tank, and the kitey probably want to have more speed. Traps as well. I don't see many attackers setting up traps, but you could. Sorry, not attackers setting up traps. Defenders setting up traps. So it's quite easy when a defender launches into filaments into an area. They see all the ESSs. If you rat all in one area, then they see the biggest pot and they'll go towards the biggest pot. They'll land the ESS, and if you organise enough, then you could essentially set your own trap from there. So just because you are a defender doesn't mean you can set up your own traps. You can set up your own cloaky sniper traps, or you can set. There's been a couple of traps where essentially people put bubbles on the outside of the acceleration gate, so that means people can't enter, and that's been wildly successful. The only use of T3 cruisers that I can think of were essentially kitey setups, and essentially they got caught in these traps. So defenders, like, be a bit more cunning, be a bit more sneaky. Like lay some bait. Don't rat all over the place. Rat in one system. Make a lot of money. Make traps for that ESS. Be sneaky. Get free kills. Raise DBS. But yeah, and also just another note: trolls are trolls. You have no idea which one's a trap and which ones aren't. So YOLO. But it's better to chase these off and just be like, ah. Let me just double check my notes. But in the meantime, thank you for listening. I hope you've learned something. Just like the last video, I'm going to link. I'm going to put in a comment, put all the fits in that I put in, and you can learn from yourself. But the major development has been the changes that have been implemented by CCP, and there's Brutix. Whoever made this Brutix fit, well done. And I'm probably not going to make another video like this again because the meta's probably been figured out until the next patch changes. My name's been Sagan. I hope you have a wonderful day and stay classy.